Hey class, I know that some students are struggling a little bit with the stories, and I think it really would help to have a little bit more background information on these stories. And I really appreciate those of you who have been doing independent readings. It can be hard to understand a story without talking about it with other students and with your instructor first. And of course, the best solution there is always to reach out and join a help session and talk to me about those stories. And a lot of you did not do that. Some of you made the unfortunate choice to go look at things like Cliff's Notes and things like that to help you understand the stories. That's almost always a mistake. At the college level, you should be able to read these stories and understand them by yourself. And if you're not able to read and understand them by yourself, you should reach out to your instructor for some help with that. I don't know how to put it more clearly than that. These are high school level readings. You are in college. I know that there may be some things about the background or what to take out of it that really might be discussed, and if that's the case, reach out and discuss them with me. But let's not reach to Cliff's Notes or EndNotes or anything online really to help us understand what we really ought to be understanding in our own minds. One of the best things to do to help you understand what you're reading is to read it out loud, and that helps you connect with it and focus on it on a stronger level. All right, I'm going to open each of these, and we're going to take a few minutes to discuss some of the major issues in each one. I'm going to start with Everyday Use by Alice Walker. As you can see, this is from the Common Core. That lets you know that this was designed for a high school curriculum. And it does give some interesting background on the information and so on and so forth. So it does give a little bit of help right here. I would like you to notice for citation purposes that we do have page numbers as well as paragraph numbers here. But since these paragraph numbers refer to everything in this website, it would be more appropriate for you to use the page number when you are citing. So I would expect your in-text citations for this Alice Walker PDF. If you're quoting the first page, that would come from page 50. The second page would come from page 52. The third page, if you had a quote from that, it would come from page 53. So kind of keep that in mind. Everyday use, everyday is one word here. Everyday as an adjective like this is one word. It means common use. When we use every day as in every single day, that's two words, and that means something you do every single day. All right, this is a story about two sisters, Maggie and Dee, and their mother, who is narrating. We have a first-person narrator here. Who is the character of the mother. And Mama even describes herself. She has had minimal access to education, but she is a tough woman who is proud of her ability to have made it. Some of you were putting this in the time period right after the Civil War, and that's ignoring some of the context clues you have here because we're talking about the TV program Johnny Carson. It's later than that. They didn't have TV right after the Civil War, never mind Johnny Carson. So make sure that you're thinking about that. This probably is set in the 60s, probably the early 60s, maybe even the early 70s. Remember, the civil rights movement went on for quite a long time, and we are in the midst of that. Okay, so it really got started in the 50s with Brown versus Board of Education and the bus boycotts for desegregating the buses, but it really lasted until the 70s because it wasn't until the Johnson administration that we had the signing of the Civil Rights Act. So this is happening during that time. I think when you start seeing the characters here, it's important to see what they look like. In particular, we're looking at Wanjero. Wanjero is Dee, and the name is what she has renamed herself. Okay, now we are talking about a character who has renamed herself in the midst of a Back to Africa movement or a Black nationalist movement. And we see them on this page, she and her boyfriend, using African and Arabic greetings and wearing African and Arabic clothing. And again, this is also at the time of the Black Muslim movement in the United States. So it's during the time in which Cassius Clay renamed himself Muhammad Ali, the time during which Malcolm changed his name to Malcolm X instead of Malcolm Little, and we're thinking about those things. Now, the church that they attend, that Maggie and Dee and their mother attend, has put together the money for Dee to go to college, and now she's coming back from college, kind of telling them that they're ignorant. Which is it's a little tough to take for Maggie and Dee, and yet we see Dee, and I love Dee because she wants better for her mother and her sister. They're still struggling in a small house with a dirt yard and minimal education, and life for them is still very difficult. And Dee, in a way, wants to enlighten them and give them the knowledge she has earned by going out in the world and getting this education. But she's kind of going about it in a difficult way. She's going about it in a way that comes across as condescending. So these are the issues that we have. Now, this centers around the quilts. And we need to think about the quilts in this piece, because the quilt is not just a handmade quilt. Let's take a look at this. Now, this is a crazy quilt from 1883 to 1893, and this hangs in a museum in Indianapolis. So we need to think about this for a moment. African Americans in the 1800s didn't have access to birth certificates and marriage certificates, and their children were being sold away from them, and that family history record wasn't available to everyone. It was a really horrific time, and one of the things that African American women under slavery did was to build that family record in quilting. They would take little scraps of cloth. The cloth from something the baby wore would be sewn into the quilt to make a record of that baby. A snatch from a dress or something would become, and especially after the Civil War, this became when slaves had been freed and they had rights, but they were being restricted by other laws after those amendments had been passed. And they had been emancipated, but not fully integrated into American culture at that point. These quilts became a historical family record, again, when African Americans didn't have access always to the right to a marriage that would be official, and birth certificates and doctor's offices and all of that stuff. So these quilts were history. They were a historical record, and they are extremely important. They're also magnificent works of art. And Dee sees this. She sees the value of the quilt. She sees that it could and perhaps should be displayed like a museum piece, if not even sold for a huge amount of money to a museum. These are pieces that are worth tremendous amount of money, and Maggie's gonna leave it on the bed, which is just so frustrating to Dee. Dee's like, you don't know what this is. And yet Maggie and Mama respond by kind of saying, well, but Dee, you don't know what it is. This is still ongoing. Maggie could use this. She could add to it. She could add to it with, pieces of cloth from her own marriage and her own babies and things like that. So Maggie and Dee see these quilts very, very differently. One is going to put it to everyday use. The other sees it as a museum piece and as part of her African American heritage. So we want to think about these issues as we go. I'm going to stop this video and then I'll talk about our next story. Awesome. Thanks.